What's up YouTube? My name is Kwang, aka cutcc, and today I want to talk about the topic of analyzing your strengths and weaknesses in order to make yourself a better Tekken player. So as we all know, Tekken is an extremely deep game. You know, the depth allows for so much creativity and diversity in your gameplay, right? But the downside is, oftentimes players will, I want to say, they acquire so much knowledge that they overthink things and they lose sight of what's really important in Tekken. What's really important is, I don't know if you can see this, but Tekken fundamentals. The core basics, you know? I want to talk about this today. I've illustrated a pyramid of sorts where I have fundamental building blocks, and I'm gonna go from the bottom to the top. Now before we do that, let's talk about what Tekken is at its most basic level. Tekken is a 3D fighting game where you have high attacks, mid attacks, and low attacks, as well as throws. The basic game plan for Tekken offense is you do high jabs to just get in on the opponent, and that leads to other attacks, right? So you do a high jab, and then if they're standing guard, you do a throw. Or you can do lows, right, to catch them. Now that you condition them to duck, you can start doing mids, right? And then that's going to scare them into stand guarding again, and then you can just repeat the process. As the defender, you would basically be saying to yourself, oh, I bet that he's going to come in and do a mid, so I'll just stand guard. Or I'm guessing that he's going to do a low, so I would just crouch guard, right? So that's basically Tekken. At its most fundamental level, you'll be guessing. Okay. So the thing about this is that you don't want to be guessing all the time. If you wanted to play a game of just guessing, you would play something like rock, paper, scissors. You know? Well, rock, paper, scissors is not that deep. Well, I mean, it's deep, but it's not... It can get kind of stale, basically, right? Because there's only 3 options: rock, paper, scissors, and you just have to guess between those 3. In Tekken, it can get a little bit more deep than that, because unlike 2D fighting games, Tekken is probably about, I would say, like 2.5 times slower. Like the fastest attack in Tekken is like 10 frames. Oh, and in 2D fighting games, you can go as fast as 1 frame. So let's illustrate an example where you can use reactions to defend instead of having to guess. So I recorded 2 actions. The first action is Brian's going to do a jab into orbital heel, right, up forward 4, and then the second option is he's going to do a jab into snake edge, down forward 3. For most beginners, this is a very scary quote-unquote mix-up, right? Because like they feel like it just comes out so fast that you can't deal with it. But if you just spend like about 5 minutes in practice mode, you'll see, like, I'll show you right now. It's not really a mix-up at all. It's just something that you have to train yourself to see and then react to. So the thing about this is you always want to be stand guarding, because mids are usually pretty fast. But then as soon as you see a low, then you start to crouch guard, because lows are slower and they're also more dangerous. But they're not dangerous enough that you have to preemptively duck right away. So let me show you right now. So I'm going to press play, And I guarantee you that I'm not going to get hit by Snake Edge or Orbital Heal at all, because I use my reactions. Alright. There you go. It's that simple. By just watching my opponent and then reacting accordingly, I just eliminated a very gimmicky and scrubby mix-up from Brian. It's really that simple. That's reactions, right? Let me add that to the pyramid. Okay, reactions. Notice that underneath these two blocks, right, I have a brain and a heart. The reason for that is because the left side are building blocks that pertain to the mind, while on the right side, these fundamental building blocks apply to things that require more of your soul, right? The mind is sort of like reactions, knowledge of like the game mechanics, while the soul is like, you know, hard reads, playing by feel, playing by instinct. I would argue that you need both of these. You need to have a harmony of the mind and the soul in order to become a solid, not just a solid Tekken player, but a solid fighting game player overall. The mind and the soul. These things should go hand in hand. You don't want to have too much of the mind, and you don't want to have too much of the soul. You want to have a balance of it, you know? So that's that. Reactions and guessing. This is the first layer of complexity of Tekken. Now let's say you fight against someone that is just, I don't want to say a bad player, but for the sake of argument, let's say a bad player, right? And they're just getting so lucky. They're guessing right on everything, and you're having a bad day. You know you should be doing better, but you can't react. Your reactions are too slow. You're guessing wrong, and that makes you play on tilt, and that makes you guess even worse and react even slower. So that's where the second level of complexity comes in. And here's where we get to, on the left side, frame data. Frame data, it needs no introduction. I already made a video on frame data. You know about that. So you know how much I love frame data and all. So frame data is the single most important answer against button mashers. Frame data, simply put, is a set of rules governing how moves interact in the game and how they affect you and your opponent, right? That's basically all frame data is. So let's say like I do Brian back one. On block or on hit, it makes me very plus, right? I'm at advantage. So that means I make the opponent recover at a slower rate than me. Because I can recover faster, I'm more light on my feet. I'm less sluggish than my opponent, so I can attack once more if I want to. It's like basically my turn to attack twice in a row. If the opponent were to not respect that and they would just button mash, then they would get hit. And that's fine by me because I'm racking up the damage basically. So that's frame data. On the right side, towards more like the soul side of things, you have spacing. Spacing. This is one thing that I've been wanting to talk about for a while now. It's often overlooked. Frame data is sort of like, it receives all of the glamour, and spacing is, people talk about it, but in a real match, it sort of goes out the window a lot of the time, you know? Because people just want to get up close and just do moves, and then once they're out here, they just sort of throw things out and hope that it leads to more frame data situations, right? But that's not how you want to play Tekken. Spacing is the answer against players that avoid the neutral game, or players that have very little understanding of the neutral game. The neutral game is what you do around this range right here, right? You don't have an advantage really. You're not applying pressure, and your opponent is not applying pressure. So it's basically equal on both sides. No one's on the defensive, no one's on the offensive. But eventually something has to happen. So the neutral game is basically how you want to direct your energy. So should I start coming in right now? Or should I start retreating? Or should I just continue moving around and doing nothing, waiting for him to come in? It's all about how you direct your energy and how much respect you have towards your opponent at any point during a match. So all that is the neutral game, right? In terms of spacing, well, simply put, spacing is having an awareness of the hit ranges of your character's attacks. So you would know how far a one jab reaches compared to a down back 3, compared to a 3+4, or quarter circle back 4, things like that. Each of these moves have a different range, and so when you have a good awareness of these, you know to stay in a good range, and if you're in a bad range, you know to back out right away and stay in a more comfortable, safe range. Fighting at the tip of your sword, as fencers like to put it. So let me demonstrate an example where you can whip punish. Okay. So Brian's 3+4, right, is approximately 2 backdashes long. See? It's not exactly 2, it's a little bit less than 2. So keep that in mind. Conversely, Brian's quarter circle back 2 is exactly 2 backdashes long. So it's a little bit more far reaching than 3+4. See? This means that if I create a distance of 2 backdashes and the opponent does 3+4, it will whiff, right? And that gives me the opportunity to whiff punish with a farther reaching move. So let's see it in action. See, it says punish. Now the second benefit to having good spacing is not really for any explicit purpose, but it's mostly for peace of mind, right? So so as I said before, for the reactions fundamental building block, his orbital heel and snake edge mix-up is not a good mix-up at all. But one good mix-up of his, which is extremely fast, is the classic mid soccer kick and low soccer kick mix-up. This type of mix-up right here, see? This is just, you can't react to something like this, see? So in this case, you want to use spacing to have peace of mind. Avoid having to guess, avoid having to react altogether. See? This is where the second layer of complexity helps make the Tekken experience a little bit easier. So let me show you how this works. So if I stay 2 character backdashes plus just a little bit more, see that? Just a little bit more. So it's like 2.25 backdashes, so to speak. And if I duck, actually, yeah, so let me duck. If I duck and Brian does either of those 2 moves, they will whiff entirely. See? Let me do it again. 1, 2, a little bit. Okay. Okay. So that hit. Let me do it again. Let me do it again. 2. Just like that. 1, 2. See? That's what good spacing does. Good spacing allows you to avoid unseeable mix-ups. really dangerous mix-ups just by simply being at a good distance from your opponent. And as you can see, I got a hit earlier by a mid-soccer kick. That's because I miscalculated the distance. And that's also the reason why, you see here, I put spacing on the soul side of things, right? It's not an exact science. Well, it can be an exact science if you wanted to. But in a real match, you're not gonna have 5 minutes to like calculate all this, the intricate details of these pixels and which pixel distance is the optimal one. It's just, Tekken is too dynamic, and the move, like you and your opponent are moving around too much for you to constantly calculate the ranges. So that's why I say that spacing, you have to feel it out, basically. That's something that you can rely on, and the more you play, the more experience you have, the better feel you have for spacing, as opposed to frame data. Frame data is more concrete than spacing, but they're both very important. Remember that. They're both very important on this second layer of complexity. So the third layer of complexity is kind of a follow-up of the second layer. We're just getting more detailed at this point. So let's start off with spacing. That was the last thing we left off with. So if you want to get more complex than spacing, it would be movements. This is movements, right? Movement is a technical skill. See this Korean backdash that you see right here? I mean, we all understand that, you know, spacing, you have to walk back and walk forwards. But this is a little bit too slow in a real match. You have to apply this technical skill of Korean backdashing in order to create space quickly and efficiently in order to become effective at spacing. Now the most common trap, the rookie mistake that Tekken players go through, is they just focus primarily on movement. And they forget why they move in the first place. You don't move just to show off. You move to establish space. If you move and you're not at the correct range to, let's say, whiff punish, see? Then this movement is, all it's done is give you and your opponent breathing room when you might not want to give your opponent breathing room. You want to keep him on edge and stay relatively close to him, so if he does make a mistake, you can capitalize with a whiff punish, things like that. So that's basically what I want to talk about concerning movement. So now let's talk about the extension to frame data, which is, this is pretty simple to understand. Offensive and defensive options. So what does that mean? Offensive and defensive options. That's basically going through the command list. Knowing what exactly is a 1-2-1, what exactly is a 1-4, what exactly is a down forward 1-2 or a down forward 2-1. Like actually visually recognizing these things instead of just looking at a table of letters and numbers. On the flip side, let's see, defensively, it's knowing, it's sort of making the connection between the frame data and the move, right? So if I see that Brian does 4-2-1-4 and I block that, it should be punishable. Or if he does quarter circle back 2-4 raw, I know that the second hit is high, so I can duck it. So Offensive and defensive options is basically that. So now we get to the fourth layer of complexity, which is esoteric Tekken knowledge. This is sort of a umbrella term for anything that you can think of, anything that's extra. Advanced knowledge that is very helpful, but it's not necessary. You don't need it to become a solid Tekken player. You know, things like weird combos, for example. You know, or knowing counter hit properties, certain moves, or how to get out of certain stuns, and maybe weird wake up okazemi situations, or all of those. These are all esoteric things that, I mean, you'll eventually learn them if you're a big fan of Tekken, but it's not really necessary, you know? But let me illustrate a good example of when it is kind of helpful in clutch situations. For example, let's say Eddie, he does a handstand 4, and then he follows up with another handstand 4. Like, in a real match, it's really easy to get countered by that. But one thing that I learned is if you block the first handstand 4, you could just do a generic down 4, and that interrupts his stance and makes him fall out of it. So sort of like this. Kind of like that. See, things like that is helpful, you know? Little tidbits of information like that. Or this is for the law players. If you do a while standing 3 DSS throw at the wall, or if you do it fast enough anywhere on the stage, it can become jailable. So the opponent can't even duck this, you know? Things like that. But esoteric Tekken knowledge can become very, very complex very fast. Like it can become so extra, you know? For example, did you know that if Law does a slide at the wall, and then while on the ground he does a down 4, you can get a wall splat? See? Like, you don't really need to know that, but I know that because I just want to, you know, it's fun for me. But it just depends on, you know, how far you really want to go in Tekken. So that's it for esoteric Tekken knowledge. The fifth and final layer of complexity is in mind games. Mind games is when you get into your opponent's head and you do seemingly irrational things to a spectator's point of view, but against your opponent, it really messes up their way of thinking, and it can prove to be pretty effective if done right. The greatest example of this is if you go on YouTube and you look up Cody versus Just Frame James. I think there's a match of them playing in Tekken Tag 2 final round or something like that, and you'll see how it's the epitome of playing by the book versus playing by feel. The classic battle, you know, between rationality and irrationality. Personally for me, I don't really delve into the world of mind games that much, but I appreciate it a lot, for sure. Because one aspect of mind games is in rhythm and how you change up your timing. It's also called like delay catch, I feel. So let me show you one example of changing up one's rhythm. People say that Law's Junkyard mix-up is pretty bad and you shouldn't use it at a high level. But regardless of that, I still use it anyways because you can delay the string, so you can do that. And you can also not go into Junkyard at all. This creates a mind game of mental frame advantage because the threat of the low is coming, but it never comes. And so your opponent will freeze up anyways, giving you a bit of like respect and frame advantage that doesn't really exist. That's why they call it mental frame advantage. Other times I'll do back two, I'll wait a little bit, and then I'll do a low. Or I'll do a back two, then wait a little bit, then do a low. As you can see, just by changing up my timing, it's almost like I created different moves. And that's the power of rhythm and delay catch. Okay, so now let's tie back everything that we learned together and go back to the original goal of how to analyze your strengths and weaknesses. So let's do this. Let's say that you're a Yoshimitsu player that just has good mind games and esoteric Tekken knowledge. You have sword sweep setups. You have this thing where you run up to the opponent, do a move, and then do flash afterwards. You can make the opponent freeze up so much that at the end of the round, you can do an unblockable setup on them. All of that. Things are going good, but then you run into an opponent that knows all your tricks, or at least doesn't fall for it. They know the holes in Yoshimitsu's strings, and when you do get up for a mix-up, they can backdash away from it, so it renders your mix-ups obsolete. This results in you losing. At this point, you can stubbornly continue your habits, or you can be humble, take a step back, and think about why you lost. At this point, you can peel back one layer of complexity and work on your offensive and defensive options and your movement. Let's say you run into the same opponent again, but this time, instead of using all your strings, you just use part of the strings. You play more compact and you move with the opponent. And so that creates a little bit more pressure on the opponent, and it makes you a stronger player in the process. All right? So let's say things are going good again, but now you run into an opponent that has impeccable spacing, and they can pressure you with plus frame moves in such a way that it makes you want to retaliate, and they can whip punish you for that, and they can punish you really hard. They can outpoke you every single time because they know the ranges of the attacks, and you lack that knowledge at this point. So that results in you losing as well. At this point, you take a step back again and you learn frame data and spacing. With these two building blocks, you're able to fight that opponent, that same opponent, but this time you're able to lock him down. You prevent him from gaining space to apply his game, and you play in such a way that you can apply your game instead. So things are good once again, but now you run into someone that has extremely crazy reactions. Like, I'm talking, they can react to all your seeable lows. They can guess right on your unseeable lows. They can low parry everything, and they can break throws very well. At this point, once again, I would say you want to go back to the core fundamentals of reactions and guessing. Let's see. The difference this time, though, is that you're aware of the harmony between mind and soul. Before all this, right, if you were to make a hard read, you would just hope that it would work. But this time, you truly believe in your reads. You believe that it will work. And that's the key difference right here. When you have all this knowledge and you boil it down to pure reactions and guessing, it actually makes you react better and guess better, because you have experience and situational, like you're aware of dangerous scenarios and situations. And all this experience, it really does internalize inside of you. It doesn't seem like it, but it really does. I think that's basically all I wanted to talk about. Yeah. So in conclusion, I'm not trying to speak negatively about complexity, right? In fact, if Tekken was too simple and bare bones, it would be less fun and rewarding. But the point that I want to drive home is the fact that you can't sharpen your fundamentals too much. There's always room for that, you know? Whenever you're feeling lost, always go back to fundamentals. But the first step in sharpening those fundamentals is in realizing that you do need to do it. Is in realizing that you are weak in that area, right? I'm not the best Tekken player, you know. I win a good amount of matches, but I also lose a good amount of matches. But the difference between me and the average online player is that I know why I win and why I lose, right? Whenever I play, I don't play to win, but I play to become a better version of myself, you know? I mean, that sounds very like philosophical and all that, but you know, I feel that there's a lot of truth in that. You don't want to cloud your mind with unnecessary emotions and thoughts. You want to have a clear mind, a simple mind, and play with a creative optimism, you know? And once you have that attitude, you can really begin to grow. Yeah. So I think that's basically all I wanted to talk about. I think I rambled on long enough. Yeah, definitely. This is cutcc signing out. I'll see you in the next video.